Hi everyone, I'm Allie with PotomacBeads, and I wanted to go over with you today what is the difference between one needle and two needle projects. I know many of you are very vocal about liking to work with one needle versus working with two needles at a time, and some of you may even be watching this Better Beader and saying, two needles? I haven't even gotten to one needle yet. I don't want to intimidate you, but I want to tell you what the benefits are to working with one or working with two, and why you would choose to work with one or two over the other. So there definitely are some benefits that go along with working with multiple needles. When you're working with a design that's going to have kind of the same thing going up and back the design, and you have multi-holed beads, you're going to be allowed to put on the clasp and able to do so right away when you're working with two needles. When I'm referring to two needles, I'm referring literally to two needles. When we say have your two needles ready, you're going to have two needles that you're working with throughout the project. Two needles means that you're going to have those needles attached to one piece of your beading thread. So you're going to cut a length of thread, generally about 5 feet, and put on one end of that thread, one needle, one end of the thread, the other needle. What this allows you to do is right away put the clasp onto the project. Many projects I'll use buttons or clasps that are kind of really easy to go on. You can use your wire guard right away and put that on, because you're not having to come back and add thread and figure out how to sew on the clasp and working with that as well. Because you have two needles, it's also going to be really easy to end the project, because right at the end I can just take my two needles out and literally tie the two ends together. I can then thread back through the bead and have one needle exit down here of this octo bead and one needle up here. Grab your thread zap or your thread burner and burn down. Many designs that are done with two needles, there's no reason that you can't do it with one needle. I know the idea of picking up beads with both the left and the right side, working with one needle on the left and then working with a needle on the right as well, and picking up is difficult. The more you do it, the easier it will become. There are instances where you're not going to want to use two needles. You're going to use one needle when it comes to square stitch, when it comes to looming, when it comes to peyote stitch, and a lot of those classic stitches. Many times with herringbone stitch, you are going to use two needles with multi-holed beads. Generally speaking, when I figure out how I'm going to use one versus two while I'm doing the design is based on what kind of project I'm making. Things that are in the round, or a pendant or a pair of earrings, is generally always going to be done with one needle. I say generally because there are instances where you might have that second needle kind of coming out the middle and catching on. This is the Lunar Pendant, and this is definitely a one needle project, even though it's a multi-holed bead. I tend to use two needles when I'm going straight and I'm doing the mirror images, the same thing on the left and the right side. Those two needles in this ribbon bracelet here are going to go through that two-holed cab and then again through the two-holed cab and crisscross through a bead. I could do this one at a time, going back and coming back as well, but it originally is going to make it easier again to put on that clasp, to end it, and to get beginners started on it. We even have a needle or a video that is the Hugs and Kisses showing how to do the diagonal stitch. That's going to be right angle weave with two needles. Sometimes it's going to be more beneficial for people to learn stitches with two needles and then go into one needle. I think that's true for right angle weave, that it's much easier, and for crawl, much easier to learn with two needles than it is to learn with one needle. That being said, make sure to get your skills down when it comes to the basic stitches with one needle. Again, the videos that are done with two needles almost always can be done with one needle. The reason that two are used is to make it easier to follow along and to keep tension along the process and along the project. If you have two holes in the actual bead and the bead's going vertical along a bracelet, it's going to be very easy and very natural to use two needles to go through those two holes. If you have something that spins around in a circle or something that the holes are not going straight through, that's going to be more likely to actually put on one needle. So whether or not it's better to sew on 2 needles versus 1 needle. That debate is still out there. There's sometimes when you can get the tension tighter with 1 needle, or you can do less thread with 2 needles, which may be more beneficial. But working with it and seeing the idea of 2 versus 1 needle, bracelets tend to be the culprit for the 2 needle, and it is because it helps with the tension to make sure those mirror image sides are the exact same, used most often with multi-hold beads, and usually some of those larger multi-hold beads that are going to go in kind of a round cylindrical shape around that center line. Pendants almost always are going to use 1 needle. I tell people if they want to start designing, they want to try things out, try 2 needles. It is not natural, but it definitely, if you're working with a multi-hold bead, it's a very easy start to start designing on your own. The 2 versus 1 needle as well debate that keeps going on goes along with a thread debate that everybody has their opinions on what is best and what they like and what they're most comfortable with. But generally speaking, try out the design with 2 needles if the instructor says 2 needles. Even if you're a seasoned beader and you know that it uses 1 needle, the designer normally will talk through why they are using 2 needles during the project. And you may like that tension because the sides are mirrored. If the designer says to use 1 needle and you're a seasoned beater and you think, oh, I could do this faster with 2, then surely pick up 2. But generally speaking, the designer or the person making the video or the pattern is going to know the best way to do it, the easiest way to teach, and why they're using 1 versus 2 for tension, for simplicity purposes, or for design ideas as well. As with all beading, you want to make sure that you're comfortable while you're doing it. So whether or not you like 2 needles or 1 needle, try both out. I challenge you to try some videos and designs with both because it's going to make you a better beader and get you more involved in that design process. Generally speaking, when you have 2 needles, you are going to have a little bit of thread that gets tangled and twisted. This becomes natural, but it's much easier the more that you do it. With 1 needle, you generally have a longer piece of thread, especially if you're working with 1 project that you're going back, down, forth, around, all the way around with. You'll have a longer piece of thread if you are working with 1 needle, which also makes that 2 needle a little bit easier because you're not pulling 5 feet through, you're only pulling 2.5 feet through the project. So give a try both to the 1 needle and the 2 needle technique. Comment below, I'm sure we'll get a lot of comments on this, why you do like or why you don't like using 1 versus 2 needles, what your preference is, and join in that conversation. So that way new beaders don't feel discouraged if they're watching this Better Beader episode and thinking, oh, I haven't even gotten to 1 needle yet, let alone 2. There are definitely advantages to the 2 needle, and there are advantages to 1 needle as well. So comment below, like, subscribe if you can. You'll get regular updates from us at Potomac Beads on new products, new designs and tutorials using 1 and 2 hole beads, as well as 1 and 2 needles in each project as well. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and have fun beading. And hopefully this gives you a little bit of confidence to try out something that may be new.